Hello to all of you, and welcome back to the Library of Congress. My name is Marie Arana, and I'm the Literary Director at the Library of Congress. We're delighted to have you join us for this conversation with our National Ambassador for Young People's Literature, the author of so many best-selling and beloved works for teens, Jason Reynolds. Jason, whom you may know from his vibrant and imaginative books, Stamped, Ghost, All American Boys, Sunny, Lou, When I Was the Greatest, The Boy in the Black Suit, Look Both Ways, and many, many others, is just back from his virtual tour around the country as the library's ambassador to the young. Jason was inaugurated as National Ambassador for Young People's Literature in a ceremony at the Library of Congress in January of 2020, and since that very first day, he has been tireless in reaching out to teens on their own terms and in their own spaces. Jason's mission has been to hit the back roads, go to places well beyond the city where he grew up, Washington, D.C., and meet young people, maybe just people like you who have a story to tell, a moment to share, a point of view, no matter who you are or where you're from. You can find Jason in his role as National Ambassador for Young People's Literature at guides.loc.gov/Jason-Reynolds. We're very proud to have Jason represent the Library of Congress in his ambassadorial role to the nation's teens. Here, making that pride very clear, is the Librarian of Congress herself, Carla Hayden, to talk about his term so far, his tour, and ask him a bit about the people he's met and what he's learned on the digital road during this past year, and why he loves young people as much as he does. Please welcome the Librarian of Congress, Carla Hayden.
Hello, Jason, and welcome.
Hi, Dr. Hayden. It's good to see you.
Good, because we're here to talk about your term as the Library of Congress National Ambassador for Young People's Literature. And it's something to think that you were installed at the library on January 13th, 2020.
I was. I feel like it's one of those, it's a strange thing to look back on now because everything changed just 2 months later, like who would have guessed that the term would have gone the way it's been?
That's true. And it's clear, though, that your ambassadorship has been very meaningful to the kids and the teachers and the families, everybody that you've touched during this year, because this is difficult for so many of us, and you've been able to connect. So I thought before we talk in more detail about your term and what happened, could you inform our audience today on the role, as you see it, of the National Ambassador?
Absolutely. The National Ambassador for Young People's Literature is a 2-year term, sort of orientated by you in the Library of Congress, that basically allows me to serve as the person to proliferate and perpetuate and encourage young people to read and write and create a relationship with literature and literacy. And it's been wonderful. So all things reading and writing, when it comes to young people, I am the billboard for those things.
Wow. And you were a literal billboard too in Times Square for about a week.
For about a week, just a week. So I had.
That was still good.
It was.
Well, each national ambassador develops a platform that illustrates how they plan to get young people excited about reading and writing. And your platform, Grab the Mic, Tell Your Story, was unique in its approach. And could you describe what that was all about? Because it was very different.
Sure. I mean, I try to always push myself to think outside the box or to think about how to connect with young people in a way that feels a little bit different than normal. Usually when we're encouraging young people to read and write, we're doing so pretty straightforwardly, right? Reading and writing is good for you for these reasons. And all of that's fine. And I think that's important and it's fruitful. But I was the kind of young person that would have been a little challenging for. So instead, what I decided to do was to address it from the inside out. What if we could convince young people that their stories, their intrinsic, internal, personal stories matter? And if we could convince them that their stories matter, then it might just be a little easier to convince them that other stories in the world that happen to exist in these books also matter as well.
And part of Grab the Mic was write, 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 RIGHT, and write, RITE. And that was a digital series that you ran over the summer. And some of the videos really got the participants into dreaming and writing and imagining. And it seemed like it was all about invention and creating authentic expression. So why is it so important for kids to experiment when writing and that authenticity too?
You know, to be honest, Dr. Hayden, I think that the key to everything in our lives, especially as it pertains to pushing our country forward, pushing our young people forward, and helping them to build the world they want to see, is for us to use language and literature as a springboard to tap into imagination. I actually think imagination is the thing that we're really, really trying to push when it comes to this relationship with language and literacy. I really think it's about, like, how do we keep young people's imagination firing off? So the Write series was literally just a series of video prompts, writing prompts to jar the imagination, to shake it loose, to shake it free, and to say, what if we could eliminate rules for a moment and push you to see yourself as anything that you want to see yourself as, or to write something however you choose to write it. Think of a new award for yourself. Think of something clever to write on your COVID mask that we all have to wear right now. Think of ways to describe the TikTok dance that you're making up at this moment, but write it down and describe it to somebody where they could get it without having to see it. This is all sort of like activating an imagination that we desperately need young people to hold on to.
Wow. I have an imaginative mask right here. Ruth Bader Ginsburg, never underestimate the power of a girl with a book.
There you go.
Okay. So with that virtual Grab the Mic tour now, this past December, I understand you made 7 separate virtual appearances and you connected with students from 11 different school districts, and you held events in small towns across Illinois, Mississippi, Wyoming, South Carolina. Why did you pick small towns?
You know, before I got this role as the national ambassador, I was fortunate to see so much of the country. And what I realized was that children exist everywhere, right? I live in a big city. I feel very fortunate to live in a big city. I live right down the street from your office, you know, and I'm grateful to be a Washingtonian and to be around so much busyness and so much energy. But the truth is that literacy and literature and authors they're not relegated or specific just to big cities. There are children everywhere, in small towns all over America, and in the quote unquote battleground or the heartland. These are all still special places with their own identities, and they also deserve the experience of meeting an author or talking about literacy and literature, or listening or having someone outside of their community listen to their dreams. And I really wanted to shine a light.
Right, in all of those places. And each time you had a tour stop, you had 2 students you called student ambassadors who interviewed you, asking you questions about your books, your inspiration, your ambassadorship. And I know you felt strongly about involving the young people in each program and talking to them as honestly as possible. In fact, I had the opportunity to hear some of those discussions, and one young lady, and I'll hold it up, one young lady mentioned and asked you, or you asked her about what book she liked of yours, and she mentioned The Boy in the Black Suit, and you said, wow, that's the one that means a lot to me, and you respected her opinion and the truth-telling. So how do you think that respect and truth-telling helps unlock potential?
I think from my travels and my experiences with young people, Dr. Hayden, the one thing that so many of them say to me after a presentation is that they're grateful that I spoke to them like human beings, that I respected them enough to just be honest with them. I've gotten myself in trouble over the years sometimes just because I like to tell the truth. And I think that our young people can handle the truth. I just think that we're so afraid to say the truth and to speak that sort of truth to them that we're never giving them an opportunity to be responsible with it. But when we give it to them, 9 times out of 10, they meet us exactly where we are. And that young lady was a prime example. She had her favorite book is one of the toughest books of mine to read. It's about grief and about young people dealing with real life situations as it pertains to the loss of a parent. And if you remember, Dr. Hayden, in that conversation, I entrusted one of my own secrets to that young person.
Yes.
I told her that I was going through some grief as my father, who is now passed away, but at the time, he was dying. And I got to share that with her. And we got to have that moment. And it's one of those things where you can feel like the discomfort of the adults, but she was there for me, right? And we shared that moment together. And it's something that I remember for the rest of my life. And I'm so grateful for her and for all the young people of the world who have been able to share those moments with me over the years.
And that's what your books do. And that book in particular, it drove me, that conversation about grief and loss drove me to get a copy and read it. And I was blown away by what I read. And I was also blown away in terms of the tour with just the way you connected over Zoom, no less. And you said something so powerful. You said, the moment I could share my story, my whole life changed.
That's the truth.
Could you just talk about that for a minute? I
think as young folks, sometimes there's so much pressure to fit into all the categories and the boxes, pressure to mold yourself into something far from who you naturally are. Pressure to hide some of the things that people have made you feel shameful about, even though you have no reason to really feel shame. Or you shouldn't feel shame about your life experiences, your family, your neighborhood, your home life. There's nothing to be ashamed of. We are who we are. And if there are things that we don't like, we have to own those things before we can change them. We have to grab the wheel before you can turn it, right? And so I think the moment that I was able to be okay with the fact that my family dynamic was an interesting one, or be okay with the fact that my neighborhood was an interesting one, once I was able to sort of sit in those things and be proud of those things and own those things, and write those things down, all of the sort of stigma attached to that stuff ended up making space for me, because a lot of us feel those same stigmas. A lot of us have those same dynamics in our households and in our neighborhoods and in our communities, and we have similar experiences. And the moment I was able to share mine, I realized that I wasn't alone, and that the world, that my world was not a small world. It was actually a much, much bigger world than I'd ever imagined.
And you shared it with other people, that you weren't the only one feeling those things.
Absolutely.
So what encouragement can you provide the young people watching right now about unlocking your own story, even if it's difficult?
Yeah, that one, your story, if it is difficult, it's okay if you just tell it to you, right? Like I'm careful about pushing young people to tell hard stories to everybody, because I think it's okay for you to not trust everybody to be able to hold that story. I understand that, right? Like, and trauma is real, right? Pain is a real thing, but I will encourage you and do encourage you to at least tell you the story, right? For you to tell yourself this story and be okay with you telling you the secrets, right? I think sometimes we push things so far back in our minds and in our psyches that we pretend it doesn't exist, but it's whether sooner or later, you're gonna have to tell you the secrets. At least tell yourself the truth, right? Other than that, I would encourage everyone to truly believe that oftentimes the things that make them, and when I say them, I'm usually speaking of the haters, some of the adults in our lives, unfortunately, the things that make them mad are usually the very things that make us magic, but you got to believe that. And that the greatest gift you could give yourself is yourself. We run and we run from ourselves so much, and we try to be anybody but ourselves for so long that, and you can ask the adults in your life, they'll tell you the same thing. If you ask the adults how long it took them to be themselves, most of them will tell you the truth, that it took way longer than they wish it had.
Yeah, sometimes it's still a journey.
And sometimes it's still a journey. So if I could just get the young folks to see now at 14, at 17, that the greatest gift you could give yourself is yourself. By the time you're 25, boy, oh boy, is life a little easier. Not that the details of life are easier, but the internal life is much, much easier, which makes the external life much more bearable.
And at that time when you're young, you think that there's maybe not a future, and you encourage them to think beyond the here and now?
Absolutely. I think I encourage them to think about both things. I think life is big and vast and hopefully long, and that you won't always be 14, and that the trials of 14-year-old life will feel very small in 5 years, in 10 years, right? But it does not mean that the bigness of 14-year-old life today isn't valid, because it is. The pain you feel is a real pain. The fear you feel is a real fear, right? And so what I would challenge everyone to do, adults, we have this weird thing that we do with young people where we go to them and we say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And
We do that.
the real question is, what do you want to be today? Right? Because that's what will affect whatever you are 10 years down the line. And that doesn't mean you have to choose a career, but it could be, I want to be happy today. I want to be courageous today. I want to be myself today, right? And if you could do that, then this big world that we're giving you, this long life that we're hoping for you, will be much more beautiful when you get there.
What you're saying, I think back even in my own life, you wish that I had someone like you saying that at 14 or 15.
Yeah,
So
me
I hope
too.
people do that. We all do. So I don't know if you know, Jason, but we keep track of the success of our programs, and it's no surprise to you and anyone listening that the tour was successful. But I'm told the students who participated in your events reported feeling more confident, more capable to read and share their stories. And so is confidence the single biggest thing that helps prepare people for success, especially young people? Is confidence that thing?
I think so. I think it's definitely one of the biggest. Absolutely. I think confidence is, here's what I'll tell you. The lack of confidence is definitely a killer of dreams. I can tell you that much, right? I don't know if confidence is the only thing that sort of propels young people to greatness. I think confidence is definitely a huge part of it. I think preparedness is another part of it. There are some pillars there, right? But I do think that the lack of confidence could single-handedly destroy your dream, for sure. And so to hear that they feel a little more confident when it comes to reading, and when it comes to sort of even just engaging in a conversation with a stranger, we really underestimate just the value of being able to talk to someone you don't know. Right? Like that alone opens up a world, because now all of a sudden, all of the human beings of the planet are no longer implementers of fear. Instead, they are avatars of opportunity. Ooh. Imagine that. Right? Imagine that. And I think if that's what we're doing here, if that's what happened on that tour, then, I couldn't be more grateful.
We couldn't either. So Jason, we asked young people to send in questions in advance of today's event, and we know that that's important to you. So I'll start with Nicole from New York, who says, how do you think you are making history? And what exactly is making history in your eyes?
How do I think I'm making history? I don't like to think about that. I don't like to think about that. I'm a man who can't even put his awards on the wall. I don't like to think about that. What I will say is I want to make sure that I'm making somebody's life better today and tomorrow, right? Every day, trying to figure out how to help somebody's life be a little easier or a little happier or a little more confident, right? If I could do that every single day, just one person, even if it's the same person, every single day, then maybe, hopefully, down the line, someone will say that I made history. But I can't live my life thinking about that. It'll get in the way, I'm afraid. So because with confidence also comes overconfidence, and I don't need that. Yeah.
No. Well, we also have a question from Aisha, who asks, what is a piece of advice that has stuck with you, that you received?
That's a good one. I'll tell you this quick story, Aisha. When I was a kid, my mother would tell my older brother and I to go outside and rake the leaves. And we would rake and rake and rake. But we had neighbors. We had next door neighbors, right, who also had leaves in their yard. And so we'd rake all the leaves up, and she'd say, don't come back in the house until all the leaves are raked up. And so we'd rake them all up, we'd put them in the bags, and then we'd go to say, Mom, we're done. And she would come outside. And by the time we would go to the door and back, the wind would blow, and it would blow our neighbor's leaves into our yard. My mom would say, there are still leaves in the yard. And we'd say, no, those aren't our leaves. Those are our neighbor's leaves. And she said, well, I've given you a task. And the task is to get every single leaf out of our yard. And it does not matter what is happening next door, nor can you control what the weather does. You still have to complete the task. No excuses, right? I have no control over anybody else. I have no control over what the next person is doing better than me or differently than me. I have no control over what complicated things may come into my life. I still have to do my work. I still have to do what I've come here to do. And nothing I can't allow for any excuse or for anything to get in the way of that.
That's good advice. You can't control other people's leaves.
Nope, you can't control, or the wind.
That's right, and what brings it your way. Thank you so much for your contributions as National Ambassador and spending this time with us, Jason. I've so enjoyed our conversation. And for those curious to learn more about Jason Reynolds, you can visit the link shown below. Also, follow his newsletters by subscribing to the library's main blog shown below. So thank you again.
Thanks, Dr. Hayden. Good to see you.
Thanks very much, Jason, Dr. Hayden. And now here to tell you a bit more about Jason's work is Anya Cratney of the Literary Initiatives Division, who manages the National Ambassador for Young People's Literature on behalf of the Library of Congress. Anya?
Thank you, Marie. Wasn't that a fantastic conversation? Did Jason Reynolds leave you hungry to learn more about the resources described in this program? Well, Jason's platform, Grab the Mic, Tell Your Story, is encapsulated in his Library of Congress research guide, seen here. This guide is a one-stop shop for all things Jason Reynolds. In it, you'll find Jason's bio, bibliography, selected presentations at the library, blogs, alongside a rich host of external resources like TV and radio appearances, book reviews, podcasts, even an up-to-date list of Jason's many awards. Especially important are these 2 pages describing his Grab the Mic tour and summer digital series, Write, 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 Dr. Hayden just mentioned. If you're like me and loved the way Jason described Write, Write, Write as a springboard for building the imagination, you'll want to try one of his prompts for yourself. And just to give you a special sneak peek, why don't we listen to one such prompt right now?
Let's see. For this Write, the challenge is for you, all of you out there listening who've been doing Write 2 times a week and stretching those imagination and those writing muscles and everything. This week, I want y'all to come up with a Write prompt. I mean, I can't do everything. Can't do all the work. You know what I mean? And so this week, you've seen how I've been doing it, how I've been pulling from things in my own life, how I've been pulling from things around me, like nothing major. It's not even anything super deep. It's just like, hey, let's think about this. Let's do TikTok challenges. Let's do this. Let's do that. Whatever it is, right? Whatever we're normally used to doing, let's take that and turn it into a writing prompt. Your turn. You write a write prompt and pitch it. And let's see what y'all come up with. I think it's going to be something far more brilliant than anything I've given us this far. Way better than all the things I've come up with, and I'm excited to see what you all do.
These activities are great for the classroom, digital, hybrid, or otherwise. It is true, our lives have been full of complication and challenge in 2020 and now 2021. But Jason's term as National Ambassador has certainly been one highlight. I hope you can carve out a little space to both explore and share Jason's Grab the Mic offerings. And just so you know, you can always subscribe to a newsletter Jason writes himself and is distributed monthly by the Library of Congress by visiting blogs.loc.gov/LOC. Thank you for watching.